false prophets by their teachings and actions. Yes, Jesus explains, it is not simply what a person says that makes him his disciple but also what he does. Some people claim that Jesus is their Lord, but what if they are not doing God's will? Jesus says, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of lawlessness. Matthew 7:23. Concluding his sermon, Jesus declares, everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does them will be like a discreet man who built his house on the rock. And the rain poured down and the floods came and the winds blew and lashed against that house, but it did not cave in, for it had been founded on the rock. Matthew 7:24-25. Why did the house stand? Because the man dug and went down deep and laid a foundation on the rock. Luke 6:48. So more is involved than just hearing Jesus' words. We must exert ourselves to do them. What, though, about the one hearing these sayings but not doing them? He is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. Matthew 7:26. Rain, floods, and winds would cause such a house to collapse. The crowds are astounded at Jesus' way of teaching in this sermon. He does so as a person having authority and not as the religious leaders. Probably many of those who listen to him become his disciples. Why are spiritual treasures superior, and how are they obtained? Why do Jesus' followers have no need to be anxious? What does Jesus say about judging others, yet why do we need to make some judgments at times? What does Jesus further say about prayer, and what rule of conduct does he give? How does Jesus show that being his disciple is not easy, and that being misled is a danger? 91. A centurion shows great faith. Matthew 8:5-13. Luke 7:1-10. After giving his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus goes to the city of Capernaum. Here some elders of the Jews approach him. They have been sent by a man of a different background. A Roman army officer, a centurion. The army officer's beloved servant is seriously ill and about to die. Though the centurion is a Gentile, he is seeking Jesus' help. The Jews tell Jesus that the man's servant is laid up in the house with paralysis, and he is suffering terribly, perhaps being in great pain. Matthew 8:6. The Jewish elders assure Jesus that this centurion is worthy of being granted this help, explaining, he loves our nation and he himself built our synagogue. Luke 7:4-5. Soon, Jesus leaves with the elders for the army officer's house. As they near it, the officer sends out friends to say, Sir, do not bother, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not consider myself worthy to come to you. Luke 7:6-7. What a humble expression from someone used to giving orders. And it shows how different this man is from Romans who treat slaves harshly. Matthew 8:9. The centurion no doubt is aware that Jews avoid fellowshipping with non-Jews. Acts 10:28. Perhaps with this in mind, the officer has his friends urge Jesus, say the word, and let my servant be healed. Luke 7:7. Jesus is amazed to hear this and comments, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found so great a faith. Luke 7:9. On returning to the centurion's house, his friends discover that the slave who was so ill is now in good health. Once Jesus has performed that healing, he uses the occasion to confirm that non-Jews of faith will be favored with blessings, saying, many from east and west will come and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of the heavens. What about faithless Jews? Jesus says that they will be thrown into the darkness outside. There is where their weeping and the gnashing of their teeth will be. Matthew 8:11-12. Hence, natural Jews who do not accept the opportunity offered first to them to be part of the kingdom with Christ will be rejected. But Gentiles will be welcomed to recline at his table, as it were, in the kingdom of the heavens. An army officer's slave is healed. Those with faith will be blessed. Why do Jews plead on behalf of a Gentile army officer? What may explain why the centurion has not asked Jesus to enter his house? What prospect for Gentiles does Jesus highlight? 36:93. Soon after healing the army officer's servant, Jesus leaves Capernaum for Nain, a city over 20 miles to the southwest. He is not alone. His disciples and a great crowd travel with him. It is likely toward evening when they approach the outskirts of Nain. There they encounter a considerable number of Jews in a funeral procession. The dead body of a young man is being carried out of the city for burial. The most grief-stricken among them is the mother of the young man. She is a widow, and now her only child has died. When her husband died, at least she still had her beloved son with her. Imagine how close she must have felt to him, for her hopes and her security for the future were tied up with him. Now he too has died. Who is there left to provide her with company and support? When Jesus sees this woman, his heart is touched by her extreme grief and the sadness of her situation. Tenderly and yet with assurance that imparts confidence, he tells her, "Stop weeping." Yet, he does more. He approaches and touches the bier on which the body is being carried. Luke 7:13-14. His manner and actions are such that the mourning townspeople stop in their tracks. What does he mean, and what is he going to do? Many must wonder. And what of those traveling with Jesus who have seen him perform powerful works, healing many diseases? They apparently have never seen Jesus resurrect anyone from the dead. Although resurrections did occur in the distant past, can Jesus do such a thing? 1 Kings 17:17-23. 2 Kings 4:32-37. Jesus gives the command, "Young man, I say to you, get up." Luke 7:14. And it happens. The man sits up and starts to speak. Jesus gives him to his shocked yet overjoyed mother. She's no longer alone. Jesus resurrects a widow's son. Luke 7:11-17. When the people see that the young man truly is alive, they praise the life-giver, Jehovah, saying, "A great prophet has been raised up among us." Others grasp the significance of Jesus' wonderful deed, saying, "God has turned his attention to his people." Luke 7:16. The news of this amazing thing quickly spreads into the surrounding country and likely to Jesus' hometown, Nazareth, some 6 miles away. The report even spreads down south into Judea. John the Baptist is still in prison, and he is very interested in the works that Jesus is able to perform. John's disciples tell him about these miracles. How does he respond? A resurrection at Nain. What is happening as Jesus approaches Nain? How is Jesus affected by what he sees, and how does he respond? What is the reaction of the people to what Jesus does? 37:95. For about a year, John the Baptist has been in prison. Still, he hears of Jesus' marvelous works. Imagine how John feels when his disciples tell him that Jesus has resurrected the widow's son at Nain. However, John wants to hear directly from Jesus about what this all means. So John summons 2 of his disciples. To do what? They are to ask Jesus, "Are you the coming one, or are we to expect a different one?" Luke 7:19. Does that seem to be a strange question? John is a devoted man who, when baptizing Jesus nearly 2 years before, saw God's Spirit descend upon Jesus and heard God's voice of approval. We have no reason to think that John's faith has grown weak. Otherwise, Jesus would not speak so highly of John, as he does on this occasion. But if John is not having doubts, why does he ask this question of Jesus? John may simply want verification directly from Jesus that he is the Messiah. This would strengthen John as he languishes in prison. And John's question apparently has an added sense. He is acquainted with the Bible prophecies that show that the Anointed One of God is to be a king and a deliverer. Yet, many months after Jesus was baptized, John is in prison. So John is asking if there is to be another one coming, a successor to Jesus, as it were, who will complete the fulfillment of all that the Messiah was foretold to accomplish. Rather than simply tell John's disciples, "Of course I am the one who is to come," Jesus gives evidence that he has God's backing by healing many people of all kinds of diseases and ailments. Then he tells the disciples, "Go and report to John what you are hearing and seeing. The blind are now seeing and the lame are walking, the lepers are being cleansed and the deaf are hearing, the dead are being raised up and the poor are being told the good news." Matthew 11:4-5. John's question might imply an expectation that Jesus will do more than he is now doing and will perhaps free John from prison. Jesus, however, is telling John not to expect more than the miracles he is actually performing. When John's disciples leave, Jesus assures the crowd that John is more than a prophet. He is the messenger of Jehovah prophesied about at Malachi 3:1. He is also the prophet Elijah, as foretold at Malachi 4:5-6. Jesus explains, "Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has not been raised up anyone greater than John the Baptist, but a lesser person in the kingdom of the heavens is greater than he is." Matthew 11:11. By saying that a lesser one in the kingdom of the heavens is greater than John, Jesus is showing that John will not be in the heavenly kingdom. John prepared the way for Jesus, but dies before Christ opens the way to heaven. Hebrews 10:19-20. John is, though, a faithful prophet of God and will be an earthly subject of God's kingdom. John wants to hear from Jesus. Matthew 11:2-15. Luke 7:18-30. 96. John the Baptist asks about Jesus' role. Jesus praises John. Why does John ask whether Jesus is the coming one or whether to expect a different one? Jesus says that John the Baptist fulfilled what prophecies? Why will John the Baptist not be in heaven with Jesus? 38:97. Jesus has high regard for John the Baptist, but how do most people regard John? This generation, Jesus declares, is like young children sitting in the marketplaces who call out to their playmates, saying, "We played the flute for you, but you did not dance. We wailed, but you did not beat yourselves in grief." Matthew 11:16-17. What does Jesus mean? He clarifies the thought. John came neither eating nor drinking, but people say, he is a demon. The Son of Man did come eating and drinking, but people say, look, a man who is a glutton and is given to drinking wine, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Matthew 11:18-19. On the one hand, John has lived a simple life as a Nazirite, even abstaining from wine, yet this generation says he is demonized. Numbers 6:2-3. Luke 1:15. On the other hand, Jesus lives like other men. He eats and drinks in a balanced way, but he is accused of going to excess. It seems impossible to satisfy the people. Jesus likens the generation to young children in the marketplaces who refuse to respond by dancing when other children play the flute or by grieving when others wail. All the same, he says, wisdom is proved righteous by its works. Matthew 11:16-19. Yes, the works. That is, the evidence produced by John and Jesus, prove that the accusations against them are false. After Jesus characterizes the generation as unresponsive, he singles out for reproach the cities of Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, where he has done powerful works. Jesus says that if he had performed such works in the Phoenician cities of Tyre and Sidon, those cities would have repented. He also mentions Capernaum, which has been his home base for some time. Even there, most did not respond. Jesus says of that city, "It will be more endurable for the land of Sodom on judgment day than for you." Matthew 11:24. Jesus then praises his Father, who hides precious spiritual truths from the wise and intellectual ones, but reveals these things to lowly ones, who are like young children. Matthew 11:25. He extends an appealing invitation to such ones. "Come to me, all you who are toiling and loaded down, and I will refresh you. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am mild-tempered and lowly in heart, and you will find refreshment for yourselves. For my yoke is kindly, and my load is light." Matthew 11:28-30. How does Jesus offer refreshment? The religious leaders have burdened the people with enslaving traditions, such as overly restrictive Sabbath regulations. But Jesus refreshes them by teaching the truth of God, free from the taint of those traditions. He also shows the way of relief to ones who feel crushed by the domination of political authorities and to those who feel weighed down by sin. Yes, Jesus reveals to them how their sins can be forgiven and how they can be at peace with God. All of those accepting Jesus' kindly yoke can dedicate themselves to God and serve our compassionate, merciful Heavenly Father. Doing so does not involve a heavy load,